Okay, at 7 o'clock, we have a quorum. We'll call the meeting to order. Were we expecting Ed tonight, Kim?
I was expecting him to.
Okay. Maybe he's just
Yeah,
running
I
a
saw
little
him.
late.
2 hours ago.
Okay. All right. Okay, we're good, Mike? All right, we don't have any documents for review tonight. We don't have any draft minutes to review. So let's just jump right into the Hopkinton High School wetland replication discussion. Hey, folks, come on up. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Everyone, thank you for having us this evening.
Sure.
How you doing?
Hi.
How you doing? I'm
Good
Tim
evening.
Person. I'm the Director of Facilities for the Hopkinton Public Schools.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Kathy Hervel with Gail Associates. We've worked
How you
on
doing,
the high school
Kathy?
project, good, and the
Good.
Fruit Street.
Yep, yep.
And
And I'm Matt Kinlan with Gail Associates as well.
he's my support engineer.
Yeah,
So,
you're on the call, you're on the Fruit Street as well, right?
no, that's Ryan.
That's right. Okay. All right, nice to meet you, Matt.
Nice to meet you as well.
Again, thanks for having us here and hearing us out. Little history on this project. Way back when the high school was built, the school, part of the construction permit, the original order of conditions from way back, required some wetland replications be conducted at the high school. It was never done. Gail Associates was involved with the permitting for the turf fields when they came in. And at that time, it was discovered that the replication was never done, that the certificate of compliance for the original permit was never done. So the town, the school district and such met with the Concom. We got the order of conditions for the fields and the understanding that the school would do the replication when the funding became available. Since then, the field was completed in 2018. The original permit expired in 2020. It was December 2020. Early 2019, Gail with the school started the process of designing the replication. We actually submitted plans, and it was determined by the Concom back at a hearing, I believe it was April of 2019, the commission agreed to allow the replication to proceed as an insignificant change under the order of conditions for the turf fields, which was the newer order of conditions. At the time, we advanced it to the point, I believe we got some comments from Lucas Environmental. We were in the process of moving things forward, and the funding didn't come through, so the project was put down. And then, of course, 19 led into 20 and COVID, and here we are. So the school now is committed to get this replication done. Susan Rothermich, who is the financial director for the school district, is going to find the funding to get this done.
Okay.
So we are here tonight, unfortunately, I guess, to step back. The order of conditions associated with turf field, even with the extension due to COVID, you know, the deadlines got extended for the expirations. Even though it got extended, it actually expired March of this year. We missed it by a month or two.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So we reached out to Kim to see what our possible options might be, and she suggested perhaps requesting a friendly enforcement order from the commission to provide you with the mechanism to oversee the project, but also to give the school, you know, the ability to move ahead and get it done. And that's where we are. We did, as part of our submittal with our request for the enforcement order, the friendly enforcement order, we addressed Lucas Environmental's comments from 19, updated the plans as such, and that's where we are. So it's really in your hands, and we respectfully, you know, request your consideration and hope that we can find a permitting process that, you know, helps the school as well financially, and you know, we can all get this done. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for the overview. So, yeah, this is a long time coming. It's been before us a few
Yes.
times. I think it was 2001, right?
Yes.
So the funding's in place now?
So we have, I believe in 2018 or 2019 through capital, we received from the town $40,000. We think we need $100,000, so we have $60,000 in the capital plan for this year. It was, I think 2020 pushed to 2021 capital due to COVID. So we have put it in our capital plan for this year, so we believe that funding will go through.
Okay. So the work would take place,
Or the best time would be probably the fall of this year. We don't want to do it in the hot summer. Obviously, if we get a cooler August, we might start sooner. It does have to be bid and such, publicly bid. And
so you need some time to do that.
But
anyways.
once we know we've got your blessing, we would, start with that process, so.
Okay. No, I like Kim's recommendation on the friendly enforcement order. I think that's a more efficient way to go about it, rather than having you guys submit another notice of intent and going through that entire process again. So that's, I think, a good way to go, in my opinion. But I will open it up to the other commission members for their comments and questions.
Through the chair.
Yes, Kim?
Just a quick note to the commission. In your package that you got tonight, we have the responses from Gail to the Lucas environmental comment from, I think it was 2019. I have not asked Lucas to take a look at this yet, just because I wanted to make sure that the EGLE was the process that the commission wanted to move forward with.
Great, thank you, Kim. Any questions or comments from commission members? No? Okay. All right, so questions or comments from the audience on this? Okay, so why don't we do that, Kim? If you can have Lucas review Gail's comments. I think one of the items that you had brought up preliminarily that you may need information or additional information on is the topographic info that was provided. But let's have Lucas take a look at it and kind of get their opinion on whether we need any additional information as well. But
Yep. Please note that the school's already committed contractually with LEC, the wetland specialist, to oversee the construction and the grading and such. They're already under contract to, provide the monitoring and such, as spelled out in the narrative, the wetland narrative that was submitted some time ago. So we're trying to follow that right to the T. So.
Perfect.
I'm here, Kathy, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, if I can get a motion to have Kim issue a friendly enforcement order for the project discussed.
So moved.
All right, Carrie has made the motion. A second, Janine? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Good seeing you again.
Yes, you all too. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Okay, got a few more minutes on the work session. Kim, did we have a public forum request?
We may have a commissioner request.
Okay.
I'm not sure, Ed, if you wanted to touch on the Hughes parcels.
I can touch on it, but I guess I would hope for a little bit more notice so that I could maybe talk like I know what I'm talking about. We did just put the request in today. But I would like to have some of the other parties halt to come as well. And this is the idea that was presented at an open space meeting, that open space should take management responsibilities for the properties around the Hughes property. So the properties that are owned by Concom, the properties owned by the Board of Selectmen, and we have submitted memos to both requesting the opportunity to chat about it.
Okay.
So
Does
I'm
Halt
happy.
have property?
Pardon?
Over there? Does Halt have any property under their control over there?
I can't answer that question.
I don't think so,
Okay.
from what I've looked at.
Okay, so do you want to hold off on the discussion
Yeah.
until the next meeting so you
Yeah.
can do a little bit more research?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess a question that, comes to my mind, and I'm not averse to it, we don't really have the resources to oversee the properties under the Concom anyway, so if another group is willing to do that, I think the commission would be amenable to it. But what's the kind of the rationale for it?
Yeah, just,
That's it.
pretty much that's it.
Just reuse it.
Okay. So is there going to be like trail expansion throughout the area, or? Okay,
Those are-
we'll let you do your research.
Yeah, those are all questions that, we need to have Maury or someone from Halt here,
Okay.
because it was the concept that came from them, and I don't want to put words in their mouth.
Fair enough. All right, so we'll just continue this to the next meeting.
Well, it may be premature, but I was gonna say, we being Conservation Commission, have other properties that we, own, and are responsible for management, and you're right, we don't have the resources to really do anything with those, including clearing invasives or anything else. I think it's a good idea to have open space managing as many properties as possible, including ours. But it may be early to say that.
So if there's Jim, a quick question for you, and or Joe. If we have a CR on a property where the Concom is designated as the holder of the CR, what would be the process a new CR would essentially have to be drafted and replace it, or?
I think it depends on the provisions of the specific CR and what it says. Yeah.
Jeff, I don't think any of the properties under Conservation Commission have CRs, because by definition, it's conservation land. From my
But they
looking
do.
at, in the past, I can't think of any that have a CR. Like, for example, the contiguous property to Hughes, there was no CR on that. We may have talked about Halt doing that in the past.
Okay.
But if there was a CR, then yes, that would dictate what we can do.
Yeah, we'll just have to do our homework and research that.
This is not something that the world's going to end tomorrow if we don't do this right away.
Right.
And we do.
And we'll hold a public hearing on Tuesday, April 26, 2022, at 7:00 PM at the Hopkins Senior Center, 28 Mayhew Street. Hear all persons interested in notice of intent filed by Ari Polivi for the construction of an in-ground pool patio and associated site work. Location is 6 Leon's Way, Assessors Map, R12, Block 5, Lot 3. Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Ryan Rosine with Goddard Consultant, here on behalf of the applicant.
All right, you want to give us a
Yeah.
quick overview on what you'd like to do?
So, so you can see the site plan up there. So, yes, this is a proposed in-ground pool, an existing house lot. Only part of it is within buffer zone to BVW that is located on site to the south of the house. There's only about 670 square feet of permanent impact to buffer zone, and the rest is temporary. There's some minor grading, as you can see, associated with the pool, and there's erosion control, is that green line that goes pretty much around the whole limit of work that's on the wetland side. And then in the steeper slopes, that kind of hashed area right there on the corner, that is using erosion control matting because of the steeper slopes. We want to make sure that no erosion is going to go down into the wetland, so it's a secondary erosion control to provide that. We did receive some comments from Lucas Environmental just this past Friday. I do have some responses. I haven't emailed them to the commission yet, but I'm not sure if we want to go over them at all, or I did have one major, or not major, but concern or response to one of their comments about how Lucas Environmental would like to review these flags, and they weren't currently, when they did this site visit, they weren't on site. And Goddard's response to that is that, so this house was just recently built, and there's an order of conditions issued in 2020, and so the wetland line is still valid, even though it was closed out through a COC. It's still valid for 3 years. And actually, with the state of emergency COVID tolling, it's actually good until October of next year, of 2024. So it's our opinion that they don't need to review these lines, because during that process, they had already reviewed the same exact line, and they agreed in their response to during that process that it was accurate.
Okay.
So I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission has.
Yeah, so Joe, why don't you go through your comments? We don't need to address the responses. We'll give Lucas time to go through those.
And I think the one you mentioned was really the one that needs to be addressed. And I assume that the delineation was still valid because the COC was recently issued.
Yep, still valid.
I think the point, maybe it wasn't stated well, was that documentation of that should be provided in the application for the record, just to demonstrate that the filing is still, or the delineation is still occurring.
Yeah, in my response I've provided, I think Kimberly gave us the OOC from that filing, and so that is, we can provide that as part of the record, and that's in a response, a text to a response.
Yeah, I don't think we had any other major issues.
Okay.
Yep, so is there a dry well proposed for the pool? Backwash?
Not for the pool. There is an existing dry well that comes off the corner of the house. There's not, I don't believe there's one proposed for the pool specifically.
All right, that's typically with in-ground pools. That's something that the commission likes to see, just so that, they're back flushing the filtering system,
Right.
It's not just being discharged directly to the wetland.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was one of the comments that Lucas made, is that you can kind of see on the top side of the house, there's that little red rectangle, and there's no label to it, and that's the proposed filter and heater. These are updated plans that are here in front of me, and I do have copies that I can provide you guys. So the filter and heater equipment is up here, pretty far outside of buffer zone. I can.
How many you have? Is that for everybody?
I have 4 copies. If you guys.
I think we're good.
But those are the changes to the site plans that Lucas had requested. So I'm not sure if, since the filter is way up here, if it's really far away from the buffer zone and the wetland. So I don't know if that changes your opinion on that.
I think, it's easy to connect a hose to that and then run it down to, kind of the buffer zone or wetland area. So if it's something that, I don't think it's a heavy lift to put that in, if we can put it in the upland area, where the proposed filter and heater equipment is, I think that would be my preference.
Add a dry well up in this area.
Yeah.
Outside the 100.
Yeah, of course.
But other than that, that was my only comment. I'll open it up to the other commission members.
Not right now, for me. I gather we're not closing this thing.
I do have one question through the chair. Will these be pervious pavers?
I don't specifically know. I can ask the applicant. I assume, since it's not specifically called out, that he was not planning on it, but that can be something that can be discussed with the applicant.
What's that, I guess? I do have a question, Jeff.
Sure, go ahead, Jim.
So what's the topography down just below the 50-foot? Can you give me an elevation down here, someplace between the 50 and...
After the riprap slope that you're talking about?
Yeah, say the base of the slope.
Yeah, so it's pretty shallow. I know there's actually not any grading down there, but it's levels off right after the riprap slope down to the wetland.
Well, right, but what's the elevation difference between the top of the slope and the bottom of the slope? Any idea? Let me just throw out something. 4 feet, 6 feet? 40 feet?
Maybe 4 or 6 feet. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay,
Well,
that's fine.
It's a foot per line.
And the entire proposed pool is within
those
existing
are
lawn
green.
right now. So.
Yeah, I see the grade lines now, the elevation lines. But
That-
about 310.
Yeah, that brings up a good point, Jim, because Kim, one of your concerns was the 4-to-1 slope on the backside there and the stabilization of that. I think I think you guys can get it stabilized, but the maintenance of that on an ongoing basis with, mowing, it's kind of a pretty steep grade. I don't know if you had a suggestion, Kim, on...
It's more of a what is realistic for this homeowner, what's realistic during construction and what's realistic for this homeowner. I do have a question of whether we're just gonna kind of end up with more riprap slope once the pavement.
I guess if it can't be stabilized correctly, I guess that's probably the only other option. But I think with the erosion control mat, and I hope, if they're properly maintained and installed, they should do a pretty good job of letting that area stabilize, hopefully. But I understand your concern with, ongoing, maintenance of that area and how, heavy rainstorms or ice melt and snow melt will affect that area.
Does the applicant want to maintain that as like a grass lawn area, or would they possibly be amendable to something like a wildflower seed mix that only gets mowed once a year or something?
I would have to check, but I think that's a good idea. But I would have to check with him and see what he would like to do, because that is a steeper slope, so I can't imagine them using it very much.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably a pretty good idea, but I'll have to ask the applicant.
Yeah, if you can have that discussion with them, that would be
absolutely.
helpful.
Through the chair, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Ed.
Is there a code spec for the distance of the pool from the water line?
There is, and it's 10 feet, and so that's why we're given some extra room. That's because it says approximate. So the well is there, and the engineer believes that it goes straight to the corner of the house, and the town has a 10-foot requirement from the pool, not the patio, but the actual pool. And so we're given some extra room because it's a plastic pipe, so there's no way of accurately locating that without digging it up. So.
No. It seems to me that one of the things that could help get this out of the buffer zone would be to move the pool to the minimal requirement.
I understand that. I mean, it's barely within the buffer zone. It's not very much in the buffer zone, but I do understand your concern.
I would say it's substantially in the buffer zone, but that's okay.
Jeff? Any
Yes, go
questions?
ahead, Jim.
Question? So I'm looking at this now, I see where Leon's Way is. How is it possible the water service is coming in from, is it coming in from the rear, or is it coming in?
Yeah.
It's coming in through the rear. Where's it coming from?
A well.
Oh, I see this as well, okay. Second question. Do we want to have, we do want to have some markers, maybe at the toe of this wall, indicating that there's, it's off limits behind there, our usual wetlands boundary markers? And there's nothing shown in here.
Through the chair,
Yep, go ahead.
I believe that the commission accepted the riprap slope as the PIB through the COC process in 2020. I have the file here.
Okay. Yes, you
I know that it's just that there's still a lot of property that's part of this parcel, as far as I can tell, right?
Yeah,
And-
it goes back quite a ways, but the
But it's-
whole back portion is wetland, so.
Yeah, I know, but it's still not unusual for a homeowner to go and do something with that land. Right, we've seen all kinds of stuff going on. I know there's a new shed, but we've seen sheds put up, and pickleball courts, and all kinds of stuff. So I get the PIB, but a sign might reinforce, so, or signs.
This is the
Medallions.
as-built. It looks like the riprap slope was the PID.
Okay. Thank you. Yep. Yeah, so the riprap slope is identified as the PIB back in 2020 on the as-built. Maybe if you can have the discussion with the applicant, if you're willing to put a couple medallions up, you know, in this back area that Jim's referring to, just to make sure that.
So kind of like in this area where the slope kind of comes off.
Yeah, is that what you're thinking, Jim?
Well, I'm thinking along there, unless this is a really well-defined basin here. But if that, I mean, if that basin is obviously a basin, then yes, I would say up here.
I do have some photos.
So I would say, assuming this is oriented right on the northeasterly side of the, at the total wall,
If you want to pass that down.
medallions,
Jim.
right? So, and I forget the spacings of those we usually do. Yeah, no, I would definitely, is this the beginning of the wall over here? Is this, you see this photo here, use of riprap as PIB? Is that the southerly
Yes.
tip of it?
Yeah. I think
well-
that, I believe, I can't quite see the picture that clearly.
If that's the case, I would like to see several along the entire toe of the slope. Well, this is the other side. All right, so it's, yeah, I'd like to see several along the entire slope. That's just me.
At the bottom of the slope?
Yeah.
So you can put like a post with a medallion on it.
And I don't know if we have, I can't remember if we have some typical spacing or not. If it's all site specific.
Would we like to specify how those medallions will be affixed or what they would be affixed to?
I would say on posts. like
Yeah, I think
we've
they'd have to
done
be on
before.
posts, right, Kim? I mean, there's nothing really else to put them on.
I've seen
Either
a
a
lot
stake
of,
or.
like, you know, 1-inch stakes lately. I just don't know if the commission would
Like
accept
a
some.
wood stake?
Yeah.
No, it's gotta be metal. It's gonna
Just wanted
withstand
to
any
clarify.
test of time.
Yeah. Makes
Through the
sense?
chair, I have a question. I don't remember approving this. It was 2020, I guess. Is that what I heard? Was there any discussion about how far the lawn should go back? Because it looks like, looking at the plans, almost all of that lawn is inside the 100-foot buffer. And when I look at the Google map satellite image, it looks like it goes quite a bit back. Now, it doesn't look like the luscious lawn, but it also doesn't look like natural nature. Did we discuss that at all?
Through the chair.
Yes, go ahead, Joe.
I do believe there was a requirement for the far end of that lawn area to be allowed to naturalize.
And has it? It doesn't look like
It
it to
was-
me,
it
but I don't know
was-
what the far end is.
When I was out looking at the COC, it was, there was taller grass there,
Okay.
but no shrub growth or anything had come in.
I wonder, just thinking out loud, I wonder if we entertained approving a pool that is, I'm going to guess, 1/3 in the buffer, if we could ask for some of that lawn, some more of it, to be returned to nature. We don't have to decide now, but it's a thought I have.
This is this area up here?
The pool's in, in existing lawn area, though.
No, I understand.
No, I think it's like, if you look at that, see how there's a finger that keeps going, sort of? And if you look on here, it's the area that's northwest of the erosion control typical note. And so that looks like it's that, right? Looks like the end of the wall, and then you can see beyond it where it looks to be mowed and maintained. So it would be beyond the tip of this, or this end of the wall here. I think that's what you're talking about, huh?
It is.
Yes, there's a faint tree line, so I would think everything before that faint tree line is grass that goes pretty far out.
Yeah. So Ted's asking to return some of that to undisturbed.
I'm asking for us to consider whether
Yeah, no,
it's
right,
something
right.
that we might discuss.
But that area, Joe, you're saying, the applicant was directed to let that go wild, and they were allowed
It's
to
my
mow
recollection that there was a condition,
it once a year.
I don't know if there was a specific mowing recommendation or requirement, but there was, a certain portion of that was to be allowed to naturalize. I'd have to actually look at the conditions.
All right, let's just clarify that for the next, we're gonna have to continue this out, so.
Thanks.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So I'm looking at my plan, below the note that says erosion controls typical, what are those lines? Is that just something left over from another layer or something?
The
Black,
The
part
black?
is hashed. See, it looks like a top hat, kind of.
oh yeah, the little, like a solid line with a couple little dashes in it.
Yeah. Is that
I'm not
in there?
exactly sure what that.
Is it on that plan right there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on. Yeah.
Can you just find out what it is?
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Questions or comments from the audience? Jen, anything else?
If I could have that as built like that, I might be able to give you a better idea of what.
It's not there.
So the order specifies the base is 5W12, which is way off. So we'll have to look into it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, look into what? I don't mean to be nosy.
Exactly, where the commission discussed the
Oh, the edge of the
discontinuation
lawn.
of the mowing, yeah.
All right, so we'll clarify that for the next meeting, and I think for you guys, it's the dry well.
And the lines.
Yep. The placards and the slope, where the owner's amenable to.
A wildflower
Yeah.
slope or something like that.
Okay.
And I think Ed had a question about the pool shifting.
Yeah.
Oh, if we can shift the pool and determine where the actual water line is, I can ask, but I think it's in an okay spot, and we want to make sure that there's enough separation, between.
Difference of opinion.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll definitely check with the applicant and the engineer. So.
Okay, if I can get a motion to continue this out until May 10th, please.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ryan, if you can send me electronic copies
Yes,
of
I
it.
will do that right in a few hours.
Okay, moving along, Hodge, 18 Falcon Ridge Road. This is a notice of intent for a patio, site work, and septic. Hopkins and Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, April 26, 2022, at 7 o'clock p.m. at the Hopkins Senior Center, 28 Mayhew Street, to hear all persons interested in a notice of intent filed by Matthew Hodges for the construction of a replacement septic system, a pool house, an outdoor kitchen, a patio, and associated site work. The location, 18 Falcon Ridge Road, assessors map R21, block 3, lot 18. Good evening. Hi, how are you? Hey, Mr. Hodges?
Yes. Joe Marquardt, joined by homeowner Matt Hodges. Matt owns 18 Falcon Ridge Road, Lot 18C from the Timber Glen subdivision. I believe the subdivision plans are circa 2000. Boundary line was 2000. Home construction was right about that time, 2000, 2001. We are on the easterly side, well, Falcon Ridge Road is off of Snowy Owl, down Spring Street out towards the Upton State Forest. Matt has a 4.5 acre lot, single-family residential lot, home, septic system, play area, all those sorts of things. The wetlands was ID'd on the site plans from 2001. We asked Scott Hine of Northeast Ecological to go back out and update the wetlands as a part of this process. And he delineated 2 series of wetlands. What we have is a septic system off to the south and the existing home that creates a ridge in the center of the usable area, and it flows to the west down to an intermittent stream at the bottom of the screen here, and easterly, to that intermittent stream, and then westerly to a BVW up the upside. So we are kind of hemmed in on either side by the buffer zones to those 2 resource areas. This may ring a bell with the commission. It was granted a minor exemption for the construction of the pool back in June of 2021. And that is the existing pool location that you see on the plan adjacent to the home. What we're really talking about is an expansion of that work, that permission, I guess, to take an existing patio and expand it to a larger area, introduce a couple of structures, a pool house, an outdoor kitchen, a fire pit, those sorts of amenities. The pool house obviously needs pool equipment and a dry well for maintenance activities. So there's an awful lot that needs to take place outside the home. We've got issues inside the home as well. Matt is expanding the room count inside the home, so therefore the septic system needs to be enlarged. Before we cut off our only access with the construction of the pervious patio and the pool house, we're going to expand the septic system location very near, almost on top of the existing system with an innovative technology, allow us to get the area that we need in that same general footprint. All of this takes place in areas that are previously developed. A moment ago, Kim flashed that plan. There's an existing patio structure that's out there now, adjacent to the home. The rest of the area, right in that area there's a boulder wall and a patio. And then the septic system and the areas connected are grassed. It's all lawn. And then there is a small play area for Matt's 2 children, swing set, slide, that sort of thing. So the area is already, previously developed as lawn or some other amenity. So we're asking the commission is to consider allowing us to move forward with the patio construction, retaining wall construction, and the placement of a couple of septic tanks, piping, and a new leach system.
Okay, great, thank you. Joe, did you want to go through your comments?
Yeah. For the site visit, we've noted that the stockpile, existing stockpile, located within the buffer zone, within 50 feet of the wetland. Stockpile does not have any erosion controls around it. That needs to be addressed. Wetland flags, A4 and A5. in Ellie's opinion, were approximately 5 to 10 feet low,
Which ones are those?
A4 and A5.
Okay.
And there were some other minor issues on the forms as far as which boxes were checked, indicating that there should be, that the BVW forms were attached. And on the Hopkinton bylaw supplement form, indicating it as an IVW, not a BVW. Also, it's noted in the narrative that medallions are proposed, but didn't see those shown on the plan. We did concur that the intermittent stream near the site is intermittent, not perennial. I think that was about it for significant comments.
Okay, so it's pretty minor in detail. I think the stockpile is kind of in the buffer zone that needs to be stabilized. Is that going to be remaining there for long, or no?
Theoretically, no, if we are able to move forward with the work. I mean, but we can stabilize it in the interim without a doubt.
Okay. So, Joe, there was a replication area that was done previously, a wetland replication area, and then, Kim, can you go back to the other site plan? So up, yeah, and in the western portion of the site right there, and then in the southwest, or the southern portion, there was some disturbance there when the house was being constructed, and that was kind of mitigation. Do you know what the status of that is?
No, I do not. I assumed that the COC was issued, that the Conservation Commission was happy with all the activities that took place at the site.
Okay. All right. Joe, did you happen to notice when you were out there?
Actually, Jake Panish from LD did the site inspection on this property. I did speak to him about this briefly. He said that the existing where the plantings are shown, I had not seen this plan before tonight, but where the plantings are shown roughly corresponds to where the tree line is shown on the current plan.
Okay.
And he said that currently there's lawn up to the tree line. So I don't know that any of those plantings are still there. If you can pull up the tree line on the current plan, see about where that is.
Yeah, let's just confirm
Yeah, be up
that.
top there by B2, right?
Right.
Oh, up here?
Mhm.
So that appears to be where the plantings are shown on the COC plan.
All in that area there, and that's grass area right now, you're saying?
Grass area and a landscape bed, correct.
Okay. All right, so we need to reconcile that. That may have been inadvertently changed the lawn area. And then I guess the other question, Joe, is once the septic system is upgraded and then all this new work is put in, if something goes wrong and it needs to be maintained, you know, how are you gonna get access to the system? You know, in 5 or 10 years, you know, leach field needs to be maintained. I wouldn't think the owner's gonna wanna drive an excavator, you know, through the pool area and fire pit.
Hoping to avoid that.
Yeah.
No, we would have to come back and talk about an access route through here.
Okay.
Now, this is a drip dispersal system, so the tubing is half-inch. The manifolds are in this location here, so it's unlikely, heavy machinery would be necessary. A wholesale replacement, then that would be a very different story. We'd have to bring large equipment in to remove that, reshape that. We chose the drip dispersal because it's generally benign. It doesn't need a whole lot of extra materials, stone or fill materials, those sorts of things. I hope it would, the technology we chose would minimize that concern, but the access would have to be around whatever is built.
Okay.
Through the chair, just because we can't see the map, I assume, Joe, you're pointing to the west through that section that is supposed to be replication area entries?
Correct, behind the fire pit, just westerly of the dry well, and then reach the tubing, which is
All right.
that parallelogram down the bottom.
That's what I assumed you were pointing to. I don't see any other way to get there if you have all the other.
Yeah, the septic systems in Hopkinton just, don't seem to have a very long, useful life based on,
correct.
based on what we've seen historically, so, it's just something to consider. Okay, I'll open up for questions and comments from the commission.
I have, I think, what is a quick question, if I may. I'm looking at your plan, and I see proposed blue mist granite patio pavers. I don't know from that, what is that?
Natural stone?
Natural stone?
Yeah.
So is that pervious? Is that what's there now?
There were pavers there before, I believe they're in the picture, actually, I think we can see.
Bluestone, right?
Yeah, bluestone, yeah.
Yeah,
Blue
bluestone.
mist granite patio pavers.
Yeah, bluestone.
So,
Granite.
loose stone.
Well, hold on.
No,
Is it-
bluestone, more granite, natural
Big
rock.
granite
It's
slabs.
bluestone, it's not a cement paver.
No.
Right, yeah, won't be a poured concrete surface, no.
Right.
No.
Does the water flow through there? What happens to the water that runs there? I guess is my question.
I believe it
Will
was.
flow through between the
Yeah, the
blocks in
space
that
in between.
quarter-inch gap.
Curious.
Yes.
Okay.
Doesn't look that, well, it doesn't.
I think the one is the big.
Through the chair.
Yes, Ken?
So the 2000s order of condition and certificate of compliance talks about PIVs, but it doesn't appear that there are any called out on the as-built plan, the corresponding as-built plan, which is in your packet. It's the 11 by 17 plan. I wasn't sure, if the commission had any interest in kind of reestablishing those in the field at this point in time.
Yeah, I think that would make sense to do that.
May I ask, where were those to be?
The order specifies the 50-foot.
On the west and the east? So had they been in place, perhaps that area that's been returned to lawn would not have been.
Perhaps.
Can't know for sure.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Joe.
So we're just all happy
We
with
can just
marking
reestablish
yellow.
Okay.
those two PIBs with medallions on stakes or whatever.
Yeah, we would prefer the medallions.
Okay.
I'm sorry, PIV.
Permanent legal barrier,
That's
like
what-
a,
that's what 18C.
Put you on notice that you can't push any further
Okay.
into the resource area.
Okay, just didn't know the
Or a
implications,
future
sorry.
homeowner,
like
at
a
some
sign, like
point.
this big.
Okay.
So when
Thank
you're,
you.
And then through the
somebody's going
chair, if I
to,
may, if we could remember what we learned about PIBs on Oakhurst Road and what lets a future homeowner know what is real and what it can be misinterpreted.
if you see one, don't mow past it.
Oh, okay.
I didn't hear you say.
Said if you see one, don't mow past it.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Questions from the audience? All right, so I think we just have a couple kind of housekeeping items, Joe, to take care of, but, I think it's pretty straightforward. I get a motion to continue this hearing to May 10th, please,
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, great. And since we vote, you don't need the email confirmation from, correct?
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Good night.
Okay, Dubinsky, 10 Highland Street. This is a notice of intent for a septic system. The Hopkinton Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, April 26, 2022, at 7 at the Hopkinton Senior Center, 28 Mayhew Street, to hear all persons interested in the notice of intent filed by Robert Dubinsky for the construction of a septic system and associated site work. The location is 10 Highland Street, Assessors Map R11, Block 6, Lot 0. Good evening, Mr. Dubinsky.
Good
Nice to meet
evening.
you.
Thank you for the time.
You're welcome.
Joined tonight by Bob Dubinsky. Bob, 10 Highland Street was Bob's home from '86 until just recently.
Okay.
It is right at the corner of Pocket Point Road and Highland Street, about 400 feet from Exchange Street. As I mentioned a moment ago, Bob has owned the home, the parcel since '86. There's a home circa 1780 on that parcel that you see here on the site plan. It was part of a larger 3.5 acre parcel that abuts Reed Park to the west. In March, Bob has separated off approximately 38,000 square foot parcel that contains the home and the septic system and the other amenities associated with it. There's a pool out there, a couple of outbuildings. As a part of, to facilitate that sale, as a part of the process, the septic system needed to be upgraded. It is a series of cesspools interconnected by some piping that was in failure. So what Bob asked us to do was to develop a plan for a replacement septic system for the cesspools. So we have introduced a leach bed here in the back, existing septic tank, right on top of the old plumbing. The cesspools will be demolished, the new tank will go on top of the first cesspool, the new leach bed will go on location of the second cesspool. All in areas that are lawn. There are a couple of amenities, a fire pit and some shrubs, trees just off the periphery of the system, but the system will be relocated in an area that is currently lawn. In doing our site reviews, we identified an area that was of some concern off-site here to the northeast. We had Scott Heim, Northeast Ecological, take a look, and he delineated a BVW edge here. The site flows from a high point up in here somewhere from west to east down towards that wetland, so it's all heading in there. This area is moderately sloped, and we feel we can introduce that new septic system in a location that'll work well for the plumbing inside the home, the existing conditions there, and maintain a separation to the BVW edge. I asked the commission to consider the plan.
Okay, it looks pretty straightforward to me. Joe, comments?
Yeah, I think the major comment was that some of the wetland flags appeared low. Flags 1 and 2 approximately 10 feet low, and flags 3 and 4 more significantly, maybe 15 to 20 feet too low.
So 10 to 15 feet, you say?
Well, 1 and 2, 10 feet roughly, and 3 and 4, 15 to 20.
Okay.
And the only other, I think, significant issue, other than some minor items on the forms, was that it's mentioned that medallions, again, are proposed, but I don't know that they're shown on the site plan.
Okay. Okay. So with the flags adjusted, I mean, that's not really going to have any material effect on what's being constructed, right? It's going to push the 50 and 100 foot out or in a little bit further, or out a little bit further,
Yeah,
excuse me.
and the way I read it, Joe, is that the wetlands was coming to here, so therefore the buffer zones would,
It's gonna bump up toward
the same way, so
Right.
they'd be moving westerly as well.
So it's still, all the work's still gonna be between the 50 and 100 foot
I believe so,
in
yes.
existing lawn area.
Yeah.
It looks like, what's the scale on this?
20.
20. 1 inch equals 20, so yeah. Okay. All right, questions, comments from the commission?
Through the chair,
Yes, Ed?
is there any reason that the leach field can't be moved westerly?
It was a location that allowed us to utilize the existing plumbing and still make a gravity connection to the leach bed. If we were to go westerly, we go uphill, and therefore we would introduce a pump to push the effluent up to the leach field. And we were concerned, I was concerned about disruption of another tank, and there's an awful lot of surface rock. That's a very bony piece of land.
I'm familiar about that. I asked the question.
Lot of rocks.
Okay.
Good.
All right, questions or comments from the audience? All right, I think we can, so what do we need to do about the wetland flags? Can we vote on this tonight, or would you prefer to continue it until we have those?
It's up to you. I mean, you could vote and, we could have a special condition, noting that we're not confirming the wetland boundary with this application.
Okay, I think that's probably appropriate in this
Yeah.
case.
Let me check quickly if we have a DEP file number.
Yes,
We do. I think that's when we today.
1788.
Okay.
Okay, if I can get a motion to close and approve the notice of intent as discussed with the special condition that Kim noted, that we're not confirming the delineation of the wetland.
So moved.
A second, please. Janine, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, great,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
It's rare, Jim, when you don't speak up. We used to make moaning noises. I don't think I've experienced that before.
It's 3 o'clock up the top.
Okay,
Moaning notices don't go on the record.
so at this point in time, I'm going to hand the meeting over to Kerry, who will take charge for the town of Hopkinton DPW Lake Maspinock notice of intent. I'm going to recuse myself since I'm on the weed committee and in a butter to the project. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, so, lucky me. All right, so do you guys want to kind of tell us, there's a few submittals that were done since the last meeting, I believe. You guys want to discuss that at all?
Yes, through the chair. Good evening, and thank you again all for your time this evening. As a reminder, and for those folks in the audience who may not have yet to meet me, John Westerling, Director of Public Works, and David Mitchell is our certified limnologist. And Dave, if turn it over to you for review of those things that you'd submitted.
Sure.
Please.
Again, thank you. Again, I think we met in March, late March. And since that time, I've had 2 submittals. One was in response to questions regarding a couple clarification points in terms of some points of the orders of condition, and that was submitted. It was just 3 responses. I don't know if that's been shared with the committee or not, but that was regarding that. The second one has been the just looking over the memorandum that came out April 22nd, which is Lucas Environmental. This is their second. This is basically their answers, their review of our responses to that. And I've gone through that in terms of what areas and in terms of discussion, but many places they say these will be discussed by the commission. I would say that one of the and we can go them as we go through. The other thing, too, is that in terms of the last meeting, there was some question about trying to define what benefits be associated with the proposed aquatic vegetation, specifically in terms of what things would change and what things would be improved. And I have a summary that is up there that you probably have copies of. Again, is in terms of looking at when you reduce the amount of plant biomass in Lake Maspinock. Again, there's a number of tangible benefits. The magnitude can be discussed, but it's just in terms of they're going in the right way in terms of improvement of the lake. And those include reducing the levels of the non-indigenous invasive species, again, something the state has established, particularly for kabamba and for variable milfoil, part of the aquatic and non-indigenous space. They have a policy that removal of that is considered to be advantageous to the lake, and they prosecute that quite a bit. The second one, in terms of there'll be improvement in fish and wildlife habitat. When you have excess plant biomass, you can actually have too much biomass, and fish, particularly ones which are game fish, like edges in areas. If you get too much vegetation, then you're probably not getting a good flow through the food pyramid in terms of the smaller fish being available for the larger ones to eat. It reduces the number of fish that, in terms of the size of them. Water quality, again, one of the things that dense plants do. People forget they're good for photosynthesis in the day, but they also respire at night. There's what's called dark respiration. They actually take oxygen down. So in the dense aquatic beds, particularly near the roots and stuff, you can actually get things where the oxygen is taken out of the water, and this leads to what's called summer fish kills. Winter fish kills are ones you find out of the ice and more connected with conditions there. Summer fish kills are, again, when you have an intense, and again, it's a relatively template, but it's kind of like during the night, during the early dawn, you can sometimes get very low DO. Also improve water quality by reducing the amount of excess organic matter, and again, that's material that can be separated from plant through senescence and decay seasonally, and that can also reduce dissolved oxygen levels as it's metabolized by bacteria. Again, reduce eutrophication. Eutrophication in general form, but one way that you reduce eutrophication is reducing the amount of sediment settling in the pond. If you have a lot of plants in the way, they actually still the flow and become very good places for sediments to settle out. Plants like that. They like to have sediments, so it's actually adaptive for them. Again, a more balanced plant community when you try to reduce the dominant fan. This is true for anything in terms of the dominant species. You'll perhaps have niche size available for other ones. And then finally, I just say that there's enhanced recreational benefits and probably some reduction in the perceived safety procedures, but these are incidental byproducts as well. So those occur. The benefits are there. There's some incidental improvements to recreation, but I see them as a byproduct of this process. So, and I guess that's what I wanted to say. I'll entertain any questions about.
All right. I think the other document, Joe, is the Lucas Environmental response.
Right.
Did you want to highlight anything from that? That was.
Well, we can go very quickly. If,
No,
I mean,
Marcus sent it.
excuse me. Through the chair. I'm sorry.
Oh. Do you have any questions? No,
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I think the majority of our comments had been addressed, and we no further comment. There were a couple of items which were mentioned that we did note that we believe are still open to discussion for the commission regarding whether all the factors to meet the ecological limited project have been met. Also, the methods or the procedure for conditioning each of the proposed treatment scenarios at a time that those that come before the commission again. A couple of minor items, the revised forms that were submitted, at least the copies we had, there was an error in the text as far as it being jumbled and overwritten and illegible. So we just recommended that was repaired for any final copy that's submitted. We do recommend that documentation be provided to the commission indicating that how the urban fishing and game guidelines are met at the time of a particular treatment is proposed. And also, we recommend that the project be conditioned to describe any potential impact on fishery habitat, again, at the time of any particular treatment proposal. And I think the rest of our comments were adequately addressed.
All right, thank you. So I guess my next thing would be to the commission members of the few comments. Is there anything that y'all want to discuss?
I like y'all.
That's right.
I use y'all.
All
4
y'all.
years in
You mean
Texas.
all y'all?
All y'all. I was just telling my son it's non-gender specific. It's very good.
That's nice. I want you to
I
do
got
that.
referred to as you guys and girls the other day.
All y'all.
My pronouns are y'all, I mean, yeah, guys.
I
Anyhow.
have a question through the chair.
Yeah.
So, on the list, this was helpful.
Yes.
Thank you. But I wonder, sort of a three-part question. So will there be goals set so that we know, like, yes, we are improving on this or not? And how will it be measured? It says we will, doing these certain measures will improve the water quality. It will improve, but how are we going to measure that?
Okay, and the third part?
Well, the third part is, I wonder, is there sort of like an acceptable range? And are we already in that acceptable range? I think of it like when you go to the doctor and you get blood work. It comes back and you're in that acceptable range. Could you be better? Sure, but you're in the acceptable range. So, you're fine, or you're in that danger zone where like, okay, time for a lifestyle change. So, are we in that acceptable range and we're just looking for a little better, or are we at a concern point?
Well, let's start with that last question. I mean, you can start from one end of the spectrum would be a completely clear lake, solid rock bottom, nothing in there, just water. And the other one would be essentially a swirl hole. What's that?
Lake Whitehall.
Well, okay. And so the question is where along that gradient are. I say that I've used that term mesotrophic, and I think that means it meets all the water quality standards. Usually these things are Class B water, which means it supports the fishery, it supports aquatic life, it supports contact recreation. It's not a water supply, but it meets a lot of those standards. So in terms of that, and that's just the water quality. Then the other question becomes in terms of plant biomass. But you have many areas where you have no plants. So I think, again, there's a mixture there. So I think it's acceptable. I don't think, again, but that doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. So, and it goes to the second question, but the goals. The goals in many cases, again, I think there's been kind of a misrepresented ecological restoration. It has to be much better when you're done, because they talk about dam removal, they talk about stream crossings, they talk about big project. This is a small project. So when I've identified those benefits, those are small benefits. I would be hard-pressed to show that, or most people would be hard-pressed to show that, not because it's not true, but they couldn't measure it with the level you're going to see. I mean, I did diagnostic feasibility studies for 5 years for the state. We did 12 months, 24 samples, including through the ice, to get a snapshot of the lake. And you could get a snapshot of the lake, but you couldn't necessarily predict, well, next year, you're going to see 5% less biomass than this. And recall, too, this is a treatment that if you did nothing for 2 years, you'd have it be close back to the same thing. So it's not, so I'm not trying to avoid that question, but I mean, it would take huge amounts of resources, first to survey the lake to that level you go, and a lot of people trying to, measure these things and due to year variation, you would be hard-pressed to do it. It's not, so again, that's the measures. The measures, a lot of the things that I'm suggesting are benefits. There's what often this commission looks for is, what are the impairments? What are the impacts? And the impacts are also very low. There's, again, you wouldn't be able to see that.
We're getting down the rabbit hole.
Okay, so I mean, it's a big lake. So to try to find out next year something about that, unless I sampled the heck out of it, and I would, someone would have to pay to sample the heck out of it, it'd be very hard to do. So.
Through the chair?
Yes.
I have 3 questions.
Copycat.
We'll start with
We
one.
have a multi-pronged approach we've talked about.
Right.
And so I'm curious to know where and when you would use each of these approaches and why.
Okay.
And the next question is, what leads to the presence of weeds in the lake?
Okay.
And then lastly, when a number of us took a cruise of the lake last year, what was very apparent to me were some very lovely lawns in the watershed. And we just had a new homeowner on the lake come to us with a number of violations through his ignorance. And I'm really appalled that the lake group doesn't go to new people. I'm not directing this at you, right? I'm directing this at whomever, but that the lake group doesn't go to new residents and say, you can do this, you can't do that. And I don't know that we have a standard to allow them to do that. But in this particular case, there was a buffer zone that this person had a shed in, and they were doing other things that were within the lake buffer zone, because basically nobody told them. And I think that's a gross oversight.
I
I'm
agree,
done.
Ed, and I appreciate your questions. Of course, this specific request doesn't have anything to do with the sources. That's not what they're proposing. But, so totally understand your points with the second questions about you gotta adjust the source, and this doesn't address the source. But that's a whole different issue. But back to your first question, I think that's a legitimate one to answer, which I believe was about, what was it?
What would be the circumstances that trigger each of those 5 options?
Which is, one of the Lucas Environmental's kind of questions.
Hand pulling, obviously, you could go out today and say, I just want to, look, I want to get rid of some of these plants, and I'm just going to do it. I just want to make sure that I don't make it unsightly, that I don't, inadvertently spread those kinds of things. So generally, that is a small, 1/10 of an acre in front of someone's shoreline, or a group that wants to go out for a project for, an Earth Day kind of thing, make things better around the public launch or something like that. So that's just observation. There's nothing that would trigger that. That's almost a decision in terms of that. The benthic barrier would be more probably by a homeowner, possibly by the people at the recreation area, where they want to clear a specific area. And usually there's more of in that sense, is you want to clear the weeds. And a good example is you have a dock, and you can't get your boat in with having the prop completely fouled. So you might do a 50-foot lane out to the more deeper water.
But that's not what y'all are asking for, because the town wouldn't do that.
What's that?
What you're asking for is what the town is proposing to do, which is
No, it's a toolbox, but I think that...
But we're not going to permit toolbox for private property owners. Toolbox is for what the town is going to do.
So through the chair, that, if we were to put in a benthic barrier, that would likely be at the swimming hole. So when Dave mentioned the recreation area, so that's where we would hone in for a benthic barrier specifically.
But what we're talking about giving order conditions for is specifically what the town would do, not.
Correct.
This is not a toolbox that's like any property owner along the lake could do. They could come back to us individually.
They could come back to you individually and you'd say, this is the thing. But yes, it's not a license to allow everyone to start doing, I didn't want to convey that.
Okay.
Right, but the same procedures you would go through. In terms of the mechanical harvesting and aquatic vegetation control, as well as the aquatic herbicides, it's going to be the density of the plants, the biomass, how fast the stuff is growing to the surface, and how much of the material is gathering. And generally, we do the monitoring, and we try to get the monitoring in roughly the same time of year. We're going to go out in May and take a look at things. And again, it's trying to compare it to what we've seen in the past. We've been doing this twice a year for 6 years, something like that. So we probably know ideas where we're going to see some areas of heavy growth where there's not going to likely be growth, and we look for those areas that had been problematic in the past. Are they getting that way again? So that's more of that's a trigger. That would be something I think the town would want to get the Conservation Commission to look and observe and to explain why that is. And then the last thing for the lake drawdown, that is something that the town I know is, the DPW is very interested in pursuing. And that would be something that would have to be, that is basically restoring a practice that currently is on pause because of a lapsed permit. So the need for that is already existing in terms of what it's done, just in terms of public, the dam safety and maintenance. It's also been the procedure that has gone for decades before that. And so that would be, in terms of that one, I don't think we need to show, I think the need's already there to keep the practice, because the practice has been useful for the town. So that was the first question.
I already.
Lovely lawns, I agree with you.
I nixed the other two questions.
But you
Sorry.
can, that's an issue, whoever wants to enforce it. The lake people can't enforce it. I've been on Conservation Commission for 9 years in Sturbridge, and getting people to keep out of the buffer zone and use low phosphorus and all that, it is a tough battle. In many cases, you can push it on the lake group, but somewhere, there's education, the idea of having a welcome wagon or something where you tell people where to do. Some people just don't care.
I understand that, but if they don't know because no one has told them.
To my understanding, there were some pamphlets produced probably 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know if those are still, I think that you would have to talk to Cynthia Estimer and stuff. So those can be done immediately. But that's a constant battle. That's similar to perhaps putting an article every year in your local newspaper about spring cleanup and what not to do.
Yeah, got it. Best management practices.
Okay.
But that's not specific to what we're discussing.
I don't necessarily agree to that, but anyway.
Okay, what do you think then?
I think that's all interrelated, and I think
But how would you write it into a condition?
I am not sure. We have people who are more versed at that sort of thing than me. I just like to push buttons.
I know.
True.
I'm taking the buttons away. But Janine, did you have something to say?
Just like, I think it's what I just said, through the chair, I don't know if can we enforce something like that and say nobody on the lake within so many feet can use certain fertilizers on their lawn? Is that something we can do? It's buffer zone.
It is a special condition that we put in most 90% of our orders. It's hard to enforce.
Okay.
And for the record, I did have a conversation with that particular gentleman at the COC process when he purchased the home.
When someone has a gazebo and it's within 40 feet and he said 50, it's very hard for a Conservation Commission to say, no, you have to take it down.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you.
I'm on the Open Space Preservation Commission. We just went through this a year ago with the gazebo, so that was a bad thing to bring up.
I've been there. And the last thing was the weeds. Weeds occur pretty much where there is something for rooting and you get light availability. So depending on the clarity of the light, you can have weeds anywhere from 0 feet down to like 11 or 12, probably in this lake.
But I think it's a valid question. We're looking for a metric, we're looking for a way. I think that the way that the order could be written, provides us benchmarks, the monitoring yearly, and we can reevaluate and say, did we really think that toolbox tool met the intent? And we have kind of these stop gates, so it's not just like we issue this permit and you just go at it. We have ways to evaluate and determine is it working, and then say yes, continue not, just like we've always done with the drawdown also.
Through the chair.
Yes.
My concern is we have this multi-pronged approach, and we have it on paper, but we never use it, and we just go with the magic bullet.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
so through the chair, I don't know that there is a magic bullet. It depends on what the weeds are, where they are, how bad they are. The drawdown might be the one that is most frequently used, but we would have to look every year at, again, what's the density, where are they, and then we would, of course, evaluate all of our options. If it were the swimming area, if weeds started to come up through the sand, we wouldn't be using herbicide there. We'd look at a benthic barrier. So I don't know that there's a magic bullet per se. The town isn't looking for that magic bullet.
Okay, it's a poor choice of words in my opinion.
But I would say what you're suggesting is probably the most expensive option, so I'm sure the town is not looking at that. But.
So first of all, there is a magic bullet. I saw it in a 3 a.m. infomercial. You make smoothies and stuff with it.
Don't you wish Melissa was back?
You can strike that from the minutes. No, I was going to say something serious. I may be wrong, but it sounds like, partly what Ed's talking about is we're going to be doing this work, but if we allow things to continue within the basin, it's sort of like, it's not contributing to the success of this. So the only thing I can think of is another outreach program. Whether you guys do some outreach to the neighbors and we do what LMPA has done, or just send out again what LMPA is. Or we can have LMPA send out, I don't know, there's probably a lot of new people there since the last time they did that campaign. But it makes sense that doing all this work and then having continuing. And we've notified landscapers before, I believe, not to use certain things, right? Hasn't the commission done that? Has the commission reached out to landscapers and lawn care companies telling them not to use certain things? Yes? No? Nobody knows?
Nobody knows. I don't know. You can talk. You can answer those questions.
That's what we talked about. But
I think on specific projects we have, but not like a blanket.
not just wholesale, deer.
No, I know the,
True Blue, don't use anything but.
yeah, I think it's been specified for certain projects.
Yeah, okay.
Through the chair, I have a thought or two or three. I was most concerned about approving this properly through the act. I felt like through the town bylaw, I was convinced very early on. It was the act that I was really looking for evidence for. And most helpful to me was, I think, David, it's your letter, Kim, it's DR Response Ecological Limited Project. That was most helpful to me, where you address 3 parts of the act and why we need to take action, which you're telling us it's too difficult to measure current impairment, is what I think I've heard a couple times. And I do think that's
To the level of
weakest part
precision, the question becomes precision.
But I think that the bullets that follow for number 2 and number 3, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Kim. I found very, very helpful and reassuring. So I appreciate that. I have a question, and then I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I want to bring up one more time the shoreline. I seem to remember at the start of this process that we are approving a general, these tools are available. But anytime you're actually going to use a tool, you're coming back to us to say, now specifically, we'd like to pull out this tool. Is that true, or did I misunderstand that?
Through the chair, that's accurate.
That's accurate, so.
We would hope it wouldn't be a notice of intent filing, but it would be subject to whatever conditions that you put on, that we come back and we discuss what our plan is, what we're going to do, just for review and approval or not. I mean, the notice of intent process, hopefully this approves those tools from which we can select and then come back. John Westerling isn't going to go out and use any one of those tools without coming before the Conservation Commission, the town manager, the select board.
That's what I understood. I wanted to make sure that was true. But I think that's important. I think it's important for a couple of reasons. I was on the boat that Ed was on with you, John. And there were portions of the lake that were incredibly overgrown with weeds. And there were other portions that were crystal clear. And my memory is, in a map you showed us, the entire North Basin was hatched. And this was to be, I think that was an herbicide treatment, but I can't remember. I don't think it matters because it struck me on the boat ride and on my sailboat when I was out there in a sunfish, and 3 times cracked a rock on the bottom, which means it wasn't very deep. There were no weeds. I could see perfectly the rocks.
Right.
So it's reassuring to me to hear that before any tool is used, you're coming back, because I would have trouble approving anything in most of that basin. But here's the other thing. I am as concerned as everybody about what's going on the shoreline. And I know that it's not part of what we're asking, and I get that. But if there are continual requests for weed management, when I don't see the Lake Weed Management Committee making serious efforts to change the behaviors and the actions that are going on the shoreline, it's going to get increasingly difficult for me to approve using tools. Does that make some sense? Yeah. And in that way, I think it is important to bring it up. And in fact, David brings it up as the last point of number 1 in that letter. Lake Maspinock is subject to stormwater flows from local road corridors and development on sloped areas which transport sediment and increase eutrophication. Somebody needs to start addressing that seriously. And it strikes me, it's not us. We have our conditions, but we're not the neighbors watching the neighbors. And if we are to continue to approve use of tools when there is irresponsible behavior on the shoreline, it's going to get harder and harder and harder for me to be convinced to approve those tools. It strikes me that the Lake Management Committee has to be the heavy on that. They have to police their neighbors.
I would just say through the chair again, you have to look at what the mission of the Lake Advisory Committee is. So, I mean, these are all volunteers. They're looking to train that. But I understand that too. But, you know, in terms of like trying to decide that they can contribute to it. But I think it's kind of tough to put them chief responsibility. Where I've seen it work, it's the Lake Association, the Conservation Committee, and some other committees that usually get some sort of a triumvirate. And it's a difficult situation for most lakes because many people don't ask, don't tell, they just go ahead and do what they're going to do. And the people see that, and it makes it very difficult to say, no, we wanted you to do this, and you don't get approval for doing it. There are ways in terms of trying to get social pressure by, you know, positive reinforcement, but they're difficult. So I know I've worked with this, I'm saying this because the Citizen Advisory Group has worked very hard, but that's a whole issue in itself.
I agree. I just think
No,
we talk about how difficult it is for us to enforce, and the big reason is we don't live there. It takes extra effort. If I am in this house and I see my neighbor calling green chem lawn, I'm talking to that neighbor and saying, you are killing this lake, and we're not going to get approval for the weeds to get ripped up if you keep bringing chem lawn in, if you keep cutting down a wet meadow that you were told not to cut down. The neighbor is the only one who sees it day to day. That has to be where the most pressure comes from.
And I agree with you, Ted, but I mean, this is a town-wide issue. This is not a Lake Maspinock issue. Lake Maspinock is actually one of...
This is a Lake Maspinock
This
question.
one, but this is the order of conditions, but, you know, I think everybody recognizes this is dealing with a symptom. It's not addressing exactly the problem, but I absolutely agree with you that, you know, this can't be the long-term solution, but I believe everybody's kind of looking at it as a short-term solution. We have to figure out a long-term solution as a town-wide basis, but certainly there's more impaired water, so this issue is not just these neighbors.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
Your point is well taken, and there's more that the town can do, excuse me, working with the Citizen Advisory Group and the LMPA to make sure that that word is put out there, that there's, I believe that they do have something that goes out to new homeowners, but that message gets out there more frequently. So your point's well taken.
Thank you.
I have a question to the chair. On, I guess, the process, Mr. Westerly mentioned that he would hope it might not be a notice of intent each time they want to use a tool in the toolbox. If it's not a notice of intent, will it be a mechanism that we have to vote on?
That'll be a question for Kim, I think.
That's a good question.
But I think we have like milestones and stuff built into conditions.
Like, I wouldn't want it to be an informal discussion. I would want to have that we vote.
So, there's a lot there. Let me pull up. So I did prepare a draft order, and the reason, you know, obviously you had requested me to do that, but the other reason why I wanted to do it is because it outlined the requirements that the applicant would have to meet when they come back before the commission, saying, you know, if you're proposing a benthic barrier, you need to submit X, Y, Z for the commission for their consideration. And then it also went through conditions for each tool in the toolbox. So you can see the way it's structured. There's a general section for aquatic management. And here we have, you know, mechanical harvesting. The applicant shall submit documentation in association. And then here are all the requirements. A map, a written detailed harvesting plan, offloading locations. And then that's followed by general requirements. They have to have GPS points of the limits of the harvesting. They need to, you know, manage any hydraulic fluid leaks. Just goes through everything that, you know, I could think of, and that Dave Mitchell sent some recommendations. And I actually wrote an order like this for my old town, so I went back and looked at that and made sure that that was encompassed as well. In terms of the discussion, the applicant would not, when the applicant comes back, it would need to be a discussion. It would not need, it could not be a public hearing unless it was a new notice of intent filing. So it would have to be scheduled on the commission's agenda as a discussion and treated as such. So it would not trigger a new round of abutter notifications. So one thing that I was hoping that the commission would discuss and consider as part of this application is how they would like to do notification, whether that be a general notification or a notification specific for specific tools. But I think the commission should still vote. I think it's still a valid vote, on which tools in the toolbox the applicant is coming forth with. The order does say that it's valid, predicated on the commission's approval each year, and that it becomes invalid if the applicant does not submit the information and abide by the special conditions. So in that way, there would be a discussion at a public hearing, but I wouldn't say that at a public meeting, but I wouldn't say necessarily that it would be a public hearing unless your expectation is that the applicant file a new notice of intent each year.
Okay, but we would vote.
We would discuss it.
We would discuss it, but then
We
if
could
it was,
object or
right,
something,
we
or
could object.
Tailor make it, whatever.
If we thought it was a considerable enough change, we could request an amended NOI, which would then create that voting process. After, like, if we discussed it and said, wait, this is too much, we could do that. Or,
Yeah, I mean, just like, no offense to the chair, but I wouldn't want four of us to be against it and the chair say, go ahead, it's okay.
No, I don't.
No,
I don't think that's a risk, because I think we talked enough about it. Come to some consensus. But you're right, if it's a significant enough change, an amended notice of intent would be appropriate.
Correct. And I think
a
it's
huge change.
I think and then maybe I'm paraphrasing again. I think, the biggest difference between the meeting and the hearing is that the commission would still have to be involved, but there wouldn't be as much, you would have to notify butters and put the public legal thing because it's a discussion as opposed to a public hearing. But I think you'd have to have a quorum, you'd have to have agreement amongst the commission members.
When you say agreement amongst the commission members?
A majority.
So a vote?
No vote.
No, you don't have to, you don't have to make a motion, you don't have to vote, you have to, a discussion could be.
Yeah, we can come up with a consensus. Madam Chair.
Yes.
Or Mademoiselle. That raises a good point. They don't have to notify abutters, but we gotta get the word out somehow to the neighborhoods, I guess, right? If we're talking about another tool or whatever, it's about progress and stuff. Is there a way to do that? Does LMPA have a website? Does anybody know? Do they have a mailing list? Do they shoot emails to all their members?
They do, but I don't think we can condition, because the
No, I know it's
town
not
is
a
applicant,
condition.
so we can't condition the LMPA to do anything. We'd have to condition the town, but they have mechanisms.
But I think if we ask John to maybe somehow get the word out, an email blast through the LMPA or something like that?
In terms of what?
Well, that they're coming here on October 15th to talk about progress or something like that.
Through the chair?
Does that make some sense?
I was going to throw myself, I regret this, but I was going to throw myself out there and say I could maintain, a listserv of anybody who, expressed interest of being on that listserv. So, I can do an email blast, and then obviously, the discussion is posted via our public agenda process. And I can notify, whatever other types of groups might be interested as well.
I mean, you have a list of just people who have attended meetings, at the very least, that's a list, right?
Okay, an additional
Just
effort to
because people aren't
notify.
looking at the agenda every meeting, I don't think they are. Are the people sitting at home looking at all the... Besides Ed?
Through the chair? First thank you for your offer. But
It's so nice.
as you said, that the notice of your hearing will be posted, and happy to spread the word however we can, with either on our website or our Twitter feed, or reaching out to the LMPA, asking them if they would share the information with their members. None of this will happen in a vacuum.
You know, I worked in the vacuum industry for 20 years.
I have a witty retort, but I'm going to hold it.
There are no wetbacks in the toolbox.
All right, do I have any other
Yes.
comments, concerns, questions from the commissioners?
So,
Yeah.
so let's say today that we say to John Westerling, you've got your 5 tools, go away and be successful. And now John comes back in 3 months and says, I want to do mechanical harvesting in this area, da-da-da-da-da-da. Do we have a vote? Will we go on record as saying we agree with John? Or is it treated as a minor project and we can just let him go?
I guess I'll default to Kim if you have a recommendation based on that.
I recommend we have a discussion at a public meeting, and the commission reaches a consensus on whether or not they agree with that as being, one, the appropriate tool in the toolbox, and 2, that the applicant has met all the requirements of the order in order to be able to move forward with that tool.
So that, when we say consensus, we say we vote. Go on the record, yes or no.
We should vote.
But I think the bottom line is that there be some kind of public record of all these steps.
Through the chair, it's similar to when we've asked if we could do the 8-foot drawdown in a non-third year. We would come before the commission and ask for that permission, and this is our intention. We've done that before.
Any other questions, comments from the commission? You have another chance.
Through the chair.
Yeah, and I was going to give Kim next.
So the other, point that I wanted to make about the order is I had, drafted it as a 5-year order. At the end of 5 years, the applicant is required to kind of put forth a summary of, the treatments that were pursued in the last 5 years and the relative success of those treatments. So, 5 years is a long time, but it's also not. And we're talking about 5 seasons. So there's definitely, another chance that the commission would be able to come together with the DPW and the town and say, okay, what worked, what didn't, what do we want to change? Are we going to move forward with this type of approval or not?
Through the chair, why 5 years? I'm not necessarily against it, but why 5? Is it just a nice even number?
It's
not odd even, but we think in 5. So.
Yeah, the Wetlands Protection Act, typically the orders go for 3 years, but there's a provision in the act that a commission can grant up to 5. So that's kind of the limit under the Wetlands Protection Act.
But is 3 not enough because of the vagaries of nature and every winter, and we'd want to see more information before we do it again?
That is up to you. Typically, when I have seen other nuisance aquatic orders, they are for 5, but that, that's the purview of the commission. If you wanted 4, you could have 4.
I don't know for sure. I was wondering the rationale for 5.
It's a Fibonacci number.
It is that. It's odd, and it's nice and even as well.
Through the chair, I would also say is that last time that they revised the Lake Maspinock Aquatic Vegetation Control Plan, it's supposed to be reviewed every 5 years. And it just came out in '21. So there's a little bit of feedback there as well.
At the same time, the last time we had this kind of discussion was 2.5 years ago, because I think we were just entering COVID and remote meetings. And so those 2.5 years were enough to say, let's revisit it. Do we have to wait 5 to revisit it?
Through the chair, to that point, our only tool was drawdown, which is why we came back when we...
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that was enough time to say, can we reevaluate the last decision?
Right.
Right? Is it wise to wait 5 years to reevaluate whatever decision I feel like we're coming to tonight?
Okay.
I asked the commission what your thoughts are.
It does seem like a long time.
Through the chair, I think we should know every year how things went and what was done and
Yeah.
what was seen. Not a formal, like, in-depth, make Ed happy report, but, like a 10,000-foot view sort of thing.
I believe we have something in there for annual
I
reporting.
think it's in the draft order.
Yeah, like an annual report.
Yep, so I proposed. So I proposed a pre and a post-management report and basic survey of distribution and density of target species, potential for success, the physical, the target species in relative location to environmental stressors, and site constraints and logistics.
There you go.
Yeah, the pre-management survey should be submitted to the commission at least 2 weeks prior to the anticipated dates for treatment. And then the post-management survey is supposed to be submitted electronically within 90 days of the conclusion of the management efforts for the year.
These are like calendar years?
They're gonna be, all the treatments I'm assuming are gonna be seasonal, so
Right.
it would be, whenever the last, depending on the seasonality of that. I didn't wanna give it October or something like that, depending on
Gotcha.
the
Okay.
seasonality.
Through the chair, they typically do the fall surveys in September, October. So having it reported by that time makes sense.
Okay.
Through the chair, I don't know if I fully understood, I might have drifted. Given the weight of this decision and how much our town cares, it's a town meeting debate that lasted on and on, we've had all sorts of the public come. I propose splitting the difference between what Ed said and what Kim said, and we make this a 3-year decision.
No, I get you all. But there definitely is, there's still annual check-ins, no matter what the
No, I
length of the whole thing.
understand
But
that.
I
I
get,
just-
I appreciate it, does not seem like the commission is comfortable with the 5-year. I don't know if this is like contracting where you have the ability to extend it once, but whatever, we'll figure that out later. But it does seem right now that the majority is not comfortable with 5 years, but go on.
Do you have a take on this, you guys? 5, 3, 1?
Well, I mean, one be at least 3. 5 is also, I'm used to 5. You could have something where you have there's a requirement at 3, that somehow then proceed for the next 2. But whatever you do, I'm sure DPW can.
I like big, still Fibonacci numbers, so.
Through the chair, since you asked, the notice of intent process with over 600 abutters is painful. Not that everyone doesn't deserve to know, but it's a painful process. So the longer the better, but I'm open to 3, 4, or 5. And there's
I'm going to
always,
reaffirm my vote for 3. It feels appropriate from when we last had this big discussion.
Does the report have to be delivered in a public meeting?
No.
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 So we wouldn't necessarily have to notify 600 abutters that, I don't know.
through the chair, it was for the next filing of a notice of intent.
Yeah. All right. So, at this point, we've heard commission members. We will come back if we had to, but we have plenty of members from the public. So at this point, we'll open it up to any public comment. But what I do want to point out is that this is a continuation of previous meetings. So if you have a comment that you've made before, please don't repeat it. We've heard it already. It's on the record. That you should really focus on any of your comments on the materials that have been submitted since the last public meeting and anything that was discussed tonight. So at that point, and I'll say in the interest of time, we usually try to limit comments to about 3 minutes. So if anybody, yes. So please state your name and address for the record and.
Jamie Gonzalez, 92 Downey Street, I'm the president of the LMPA. And through the chair, just a question for Dave. Is phosphorus currently a problem with the lake? Do we currently have a phosphorus problem? Generally, what the ingredient that causes from fertilizers and stuff that cause problems with weeds?
Well, fertilizer includes both nitrogen and phosphorus, and so we're dealing, it's mostly hard by nitrogen. Phosphorus is generally considered to be the most rate limiting, to use that term, the thing that kind of particularly translates into most productivity. So generally, it's easier to control phosphorus than nitrogen. So I guess is that question? I don't think you,
I get my question is it currently a problem in Lake Maspinock?
Maybe a better question is
I know
Lake
the
Maspinock
problem is
currently
at what
impaired?
level. I know what concentrations we have, and they're typically below they're below the guidance that the state likes to see. They like to see it below 25 parts per billion, and I think it's running about 12 or 18, something like that. I didn't bring the reports.
All right.
Okay.
What's your point?
That was my question.
Okay.
And just a couple of questions that were, or comments about what was said before about things that we've been doing. The LMPA does do, we do an annual mailing every year to all the residents around the lake. We do have a Facebook page. We do have a website. We do try to reach out to new homeowners as they come in. We have a welcome wagon. We due to COVID, we kind of got restricted a little bit with that. But we did have that, and we probably are going to revise that as well. And as far as notifications goes, we do send out emails and Facebook posts to remind people that these commission hearings are going on. So we would be more than happy to assist in that effort. And I just want to, again, throw my support behind the CIG. They've done a lot of work, having been on that commission. And that it's a lot of effort. And as far as going back to, talking about, talking to your neighbor, I think that's something that we continue to do. We do have pamphlets reminding lake abutters that using the lake-friendly fertilizer is the way to go. So we are involved in that process. And hopefully that answers some of your questions. And I'm more than happy to talk to you guys if you have any other questions about that.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, please state your name and your address for the record.
Carol Essler, 16 Oakhurst. I have 2 points to make. One is a report. I'm not shy about talking to neighbors about the lake and fertilizer, and I want to quote a neighbor that I recently talked to spreading fertilizer, just how deep-seated this is. What he said to me was, "This is what I like to do. It's who I am." I want to say that this green lawn males spread fertilizer, sorry about the feminist viewpoint here, on the weekend thing, is pretty deep-seated, and the gentle, much appreciated pamphlet from LMPA doesn't even come close to what's needed. I personally feel that what's needed is some legal action about what's allowed around the lake. Okay, that's point one. We're feeding the weeds and then we want to treat them. And point two is a bit more emotional. And quite simply, in this time of ecological despair, do we need to add to it by poisoning our local lake, our home lake? I don't think so. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the public? All right. So I'll just say, in response to those two, and we've talked about this before, the Conservation Commission's purview and role in this is, very descriptive. Whether or not it complies with, or whether we feel like it complies with the Wetland Protection Act and our local bylaws, wetlands bylaws. A lot of stuff that y'all talked about is, federal law. It's the multiple. It's different things. If you have concerns about water quality, I encourage everybody to look at Mass DP's Integrate List of Waters for Clean Water Act. and see what's on the list, not just Lake Maspinock, but all over Hopkinton, because we're in several watersheds. And if you really do have concerns and want some legal action, I encourage everybody to look into that. And you know, we have town meeting here, so that is the better thing for making changes to our bylaws, which I encourage y'all to do. It's a challenge, but unfortunately, that is not the purview of us here at Conservation Commission. So no more public comment. I noticed nobody's got their hands up. Oh, they can't see it now because you can't like see little hands on the screen. Yes.
Hey, there's somebody at home, I think it's.
I was like looking at the. Okay, sorry. Go on.
To the chair, what was that DEP website that you mentioned?
Oh, it's the integrated list of. I always get it wrong.
It's list of the impaired waters.
I always call it the 303D list, but it's not that anymore.
303D, 305B list. It's a list they come up in terms of.
303D, 305.
Well, Clean Water Act, 303D, 305C. They used to report them separately, now they do them both. Basically, it's a listing by the state required by the feds every 5 years or so.
Every
They're
2
always,
years
and they're
it's
always
supposed
late
to be
with it, which ones are not meeting water quality standards in the state.
Right. And so then the state law, based on that list, requires the towns to do specific things, including public outreach, including, different controls. And fortunately for us, Lake Maspinock is on the better side of that list as compared to other waters, but I'm not even going to go there now. We're lucky to be in the Charles River watershed. So,
Can I ask one more question to the
yes,
chair?
absolutely.
Do we use salt on West Main Street, and could that be a contributing factor? Gets pushed into the lake in the off-season?
Would you like to answer whether you use salt?
Through the chair, we use salt on all our public roads. Whether that contributes to the
Except for the ones that have a condition that say you don't, right?
so it's limited salt use in those areas. Whether that contributes to the weed growth, I don't know. I would ask if Dave has any knowledge of that.
Usually salt's not considered to be the cause of weeds and such.
Thank you. Kills things more often than makes them grow.
I drive on that every day because I live there, so I like that salt is used. So I'm glad that it's not hurting.
I'm appreciating that Ed is not saying anything right now. He's holding his tongue so bad.
I did just share a picture from my childhood with John, which maybe you can pull up on his computer and show everybody, of what we used to do in the streets when I was about, let's see, it was a 1957 Saab.
Lick the road like deer.
And used to go behind the car on skis on the street.
We used to do it on our shoes.
We did speakers.
We still do that.
Good gracious.
Slushy.
Okay, so, any other questions, comments from the commission? All right, I will give Kim one more chance to give us guidance, but before that, this has been a long process, and I wanted to say with great appreciation for everybody that's been involved, because I appreciate all the passion and the comments and the really thought process that went in here, and it's awesome that people care so much about keeping our water clean and recreational use. So even if I seem like I was short, I do appreciate all your time and effort and public process. So at that point, I am going to ask Kim for advice on what you think our next steps should be.
Sure. The commission could decide to move to a vote at this point, or you could have discussion on the specifics of the order, which I would encourage you to read if you haven't yet.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a doozy. If you did decide to vote tonight, you could still review the order at the next, at the next meeting, as is always your right, which is why we kind of go through and, delay it by a meeting when we issue the orders. If you went that route, you wouldn't be able to accept any new additional information from the applicant or comment from the public. It would be strictly a discussion amongst the commission about the order. So I'll leave that up to you, whether or not you guys want to go for a vote.
And because we've run into this issue before, once we vote to close the hearing, we have 30 days to issue the order?
21 days.
21 days. So keep that in mind.
So it gives us 2 weeks to next meeting to review and approve the order, and we're still within 5 to 7 days of the 21 days.
Correct.
So we can vote to close the hearing.
Can
and
we
then
get
vote on the order next time.
Right. Right, vote tonight on the notice of intent. But can we get the draft order conditions or the proposed order conditions ahead of the meeting? If we already do,
I already sent it to you.
I knew as soon as that was work, we started.
We did
I'm gonna go back and be quiet.
to 3, right?
I will make some
So that would be
updates
amended.
based on your comments, but, you know, a large chunk of it is definitely.
Right.
Already has to.
Oh, look, it's in my junk file.
But yeah, I mean, to Carrie's point, we do not want to, we got to issue something within 21 days.
And our next meeting is within that, it's 14 days, I assume.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't, no quabbling at the next meeting.
Sure.
We gotta get it done.
No, I get that.
So so it's basically a level of comfort with, you
Yeah,
know,
we can-
that you feel like you can review it and feel comfortable enough having it if we close this meeting. But the only difference really would be that when the time starts ticking for us and whether or not we want any more information, and I'm thinking based on the lack of comments at this point, we feel like we have enough information to make a decision. So now it's really just about that schedule. And I do agree, like as we discussed, to switch the timeframe to a 3-year order. And is there anything else? So I guess at this point, you have another comment?
I was going to say, I think that we have all the information that we can use, and I'd be happy to make a motion to close this, so you can ask for one.
Well, if you make the motion, then I don't have to ask for it.
I move that we
So
close the
Jim
public
make-
hearing in the subject, whatever it is, 188-1784, Lake Maspinock DPW notice of intent.
Is that, okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll
Is it
second.
good enough for a motion? Okay. I hate the rules of order. That's why Jeff's always the chair.
Is that one?
Oh my gosh, it's like the biggest reason, and then he does such a good job, and I don't like all the work, but as you sit here quiet, you're fabulous.
I
Don't
second
change.
that motion.
10 seconds. All right. So, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Oh, goodness gracious.
Actually, I think I only said to close the public.
Yes, this is just a
What?
motion
Then we
on
just
closing.
motion? Then we make a
No,
motion to
wait,
close
I
it?
have a motion to approve the notice of intent.
Okay, what do I need? That's what I
I
asked
only
for.
made a motion to close the public
hearing?
hearing. I think I forgot the part about approve.
Would
the
you like
notice
to
of intent.
amend your motion?
I would like to amend my motion to, let's see, move that we close the public hearing and vote to approve the notice of intent from DPW 188-1784's DEP found.
Jim, are you proposing that under the Wetlands Protection Act and the local bylaws?
Yeah, I was gonna say, should we separate?
Guess under both. I can't think of a reason, maybe somebody, is there a reason why we want to split this?
Why don't we just split it?
Okay, let's split it. So I'll make that motion under the Wetlands Protection Act first.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Can I get a point of clarification?
Yes, you may.
So with this vote, we are approving the notice of intent, approving all of the tools, thank you. I'm just getting old stuff. Improving all of the tools, but before any tool is used, there'll have to be a hearing, and maybe not necessarily, I don't know if that's a technical word I want to use.
They have to come back before the commission.
Have to come back.
With the plan, it has to be.
Discussion.
Okay.
Yes, and the commission has to.
Okay.
Move it forward. And the tools, it's not, as in all the tools that were,
Right.
We're not approving the use of any tool, just for it to be in the toolbox.
correct, yes, we have conditions that dictate what needs to be done for those tools to be used. Nobody's, I don't hear any voices here telling me I'm doing something wrong, so that's good.
Second.
Okay. So we have clarification? We have a motion? Need a second? We have a second? Oh, geez.
I think I seconded it.
Okay, under the act. So now I can do a vote? All right, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? All right, so the
I'll
motion.
abstain. Can, since I recuse myself.
So the motion under Wetland Protection Act passes. So now we need a similar motion to close the hearing and approve the NOI under the local bylaws.
I'll make that motion.
Jim makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have a second? Don't you love that when it makes it easier for them? All right, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay?
Abstain again.
Jeff abstains again. So I believe the motions pass. And now we have our work to do of finalizing this order of conditions to our satisfaction and making sure it's very clear about what steps, when the approvals come through and what steps need to be done when it's going to be in there. But Kim's an excellent writer, so I think it will be very clear. Okay? All right. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair and Commission, thank you very much for your time and energy.
Through the chair, I just wanted to say thank you very much to the commission, to your agent, to Lucas Environmental, and to the public who has weighed in on this. It truly helps us to make better decisions, and I appreciate everyone's help with that. So thank you very much.
Awesome. And with that, I get to turn the gavel back over to you.
I think we have to take it home.
You did a fine job.
Oh, man. All right.
Take it home, we're done.
Right? I think that was it on the agenda.
So did you like that picture?
Hearing no objections, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, so Jim made a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
Jeff seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that's it. We're adjourned.